Okay, here's your prompt for Monday. Go ahead and spend 5 minutes doing this. You can pause me. Now that you're done, someone should lead prayer. Also, a heads up, the activity or the lesson from Friday is recorded and it is in the sub-lesson plans. You need to make sure that you watch that on your own time and take those important notes. It's very important that you understand the concept of conscience and the informed conscience. So please make sure that you listen to that. You will be responsible for understanding that come final and come throughout the rest of our morality unit. So make sure that you watch that. We would have had our reading quiz on Friday, but we couldn't because of snow, so you get to do it now. Woo-hoo! Go ahead and pause me for 5 minutes to take the reading quiz. Mr. Penny Legion will collect it, and then you can proceed with our lesson for the day. Don't forget, we have our second reading quiz on schedule for tomorrow. So, why do we even need this class called morality? Because of sin. Because we have sin in our lives, just like the morality definition from the USCCB talked about the fact that there is concupiscence. So what exactly is sin, and how is it defined by the church? First, sin is an offense against God. It's something we do that offends God, that goes against God's plan, that goes against the will of God in the world. It's also a fault against reason, truth, and right conscience. So anytime you're not following your conscience, again, your informed conscience, which is coming out of the lesson from Friday. So again, make sure you watch that. Anytime you're going directly against reason or truth, that would also be a sin. So doing something you know to be flawed would be a sin. It's deliberate, meaning that you choose it. It could be a thought, word, or deed. So it does not have to manifest in the world. It could just simply be going on in your head or an attitude of your heart. It could be both word and deed as well. So something you say or something you do. It can also be an omission, meaning a lack of doing something, a lack of saying something. So choosing, refraining from doing something you know you're called to do. Contrary, again, to this eternal law of God. We talked about the fact that there is a moral objective truth, a moral objective law, and that's the eternal law of God written into creation. So anytime we deliberately think, say, or do something, or fail to think, say, or do something we're called to by our very nature, by the moral law written in creation, that is a sin. Once you have this definition, go ahead and move on to the next slide. So you and your partner are going to get an envelope from Mr. Penny Legion, and inside are slips of paper with different sins on them. With your partner, I want you to determine how you can categorize these sins into two groups. There are two categories in there. So determine with your partner what you think or how you would break those up into two groups, and make sure you're able to explain why you would put it in that group, and give each group a name that describes why you put them all together. Give yourselves about 10 minutes to do this, working with your partner. So you've all created these two categories, these two lists. Let's see if you're on the right track. This is just to give you a little preface. So group one, or one of your two groups, should have cheating on a test. The other should have watching a classmate cheat on a test. Taking the Lord's name in vain, not going to Mass on a holy day of obligation. So I want you to create a name for each of your groups, right, that describes the key characteristics. If your groups don't look like the ones on the board, I want you to use these as inspiration to try to see if you can find the pattern. So give yourself another 2 to 3 minutes to kind of figure that out. So ultimately, we have two types of sin. We have sins of commission and sins of omission. What do I mean when I say that? Well, a sin of commission is the result of freely choosing a thought, word, or deed. So it's something that we are involved in the process of, where a sin of omission is just failing to do something. So again, the difference of the test, cheating on the test is a direct action we took, where seeing someone cheat on a test and not saying something is a failure to do something. We're called to stand up for truth and integrity and justice and righteousness. And so failing to say something about the cheating student would be a sin of omission, because we're omitting something that we're supposed to be doing. So go ahead, now that you know that, and double check your answers and see if you can put things that people did and things that people failed to do in those two groups. Give yourselves 2 minutes to do that and then move on to the next slide. So what constitutes something being morally good? Well, for something to be morally good, both the object, remembering the action, word, or thought itself, and the intention must be good. Circumstances are part of it, but they're secondary because they might determine whether you're actually free to make the decision or not, or the degree of how good or bad it is. So I want you to jot that down, and we'll kind of unpack that on the next slide. All right, so you have a chart in your OneNote to help you kind of work on this. So let's see. Let's see if we can determine if something is a sin. Stealing bread. Is the object, the specific thing they're choosing to do, good? Yes or no? The intention is to feed your family. Is that a good or a bad? Is this action sinful? Remember, both the object and the intention have to be good for the act to be morally good. In this case, theft is still wrong, so even though the intention is to feed your family, it is still a sinful act. Again, the degree might be very different, right? If the circumstances are you need that to live. However, it's still a moral wrong to steal. It also would be morally wrong for the fact that the system is set up in a way that people feel the need to steal to feed themselves. As a social system, it should be constructed in a way that everyone is fed. But that doesn't mean that stealing is okay. So go ahead. I think Mr. Pennylegion has a couple examples in the notes of different objects and intentions for you to break down. You can also come up with a few as a class to break down if something is a sin or not, using the object and the intention. Now remember, people are going to sin. We all sin. That's part of the reality. We're created good, but we also sin. So just because someone does something morally wrong or a person sins does not equate to being damned to hell. I want to make this clear. Just because you say something someone did was immoral, you are not condemning them. You are not saying they as a person are immoral. The action or the lack of action is immoral. Because if you remember, and this is very important to our faith, we believe in mercy and reconciliation. That is like the third point of what the bishops said, right? We're created good, but we're fallen, and we can be redeemed, and we can reconcile. We have mercy in the world, which is why Pope Francis focused so much on mercy this last year. It's a reminder that we all sin, we all make mistakes, and we're also capable of turning our lives, having a metanoia, a conversion, returning back to doing the morally good thing. And just because we've done something morally wrong does not mean that we are forever damned to hell. So you don't get to go around going, oh, you did something bad. You're awful. You'll never go to heaven. That is not an acceptable behavior according to church teaching. So remember, for something to be morally good, both the object, the action itself, and the intention have to be good. Obviously, that's not always the case. However, we get to reconcile or come back to God in our belief system.